thought that intro was going to go forever. That seemed extra long.
That's the extended dub.
It's a little bit longer because like I actually made it 40 seconds when it should be 30 seconds. So blame me if it's too long. Like it would be another half an hour to go it down from 10 seconds to get the music and the timing and the graphics right. That's the thing. I don't know if you knew that. Did you know that? Took some time to...
I time every time. I time it. So I'm on top of it, yeah.
Okay. I think 30 seconds is the right thing, but I kept it at 40. I don't know. To cut it off like at a certain part where the drum beat is right on, you know what I'm saying? If it just cut off, like this would not, I don't know, it would not sound good. I'm pretty sure the chat really wanted to know that.
The revolt, yes.
That's right,
Is it true that dub is going to be out on Record Store Day as a 7-inch limited edition? That's the rumor.
Really?
Oh God, we're not that far away from those shenanigans, are we?
Should get the list in what, a month and a half?
Yeah, I can't wait. What's this Dalai Lama? Why are we talking about the Dalai Lama exactly?
I don't know. It's because Jose had to bring it up. I don't know why. I am unsure. So tonight we have this crazy topic because I basically questioned Groove Seeker here and Joel here, to come up with a topic. The original topic was Joel rants. We go on Joel rants, and Joel was like, "Hell no, that's not what I'm here to do." I'm like,
"Oh, the original topic is as Jason figured out where he's going to live." That was the original topic.
No one's going to talk about how heavy my elliptical machine is. No one wants to talk about that. The elliptical machine was not mastered by Kevin Gray. Okay, just FYI, anybody.
We can get a good 30, 40 minutes out of that. We could do it.
No. I mean, quick story time. When I moved in my apartment, I think two and a half years ago, I had the bright idea of hosting both Nate Mars, the Wolfman, and Jose, and then I conned them into helping me move stuff. But it was only the heavy stuff, and we tried to move that elliptical up 3 flights of stairs. We didn't even get up, a couple steps before I was like, "This is a fail. This could not be done. We are definitely not bodybuilders. We're not ready for this." So we just threw it in my garage, and that's where it sat as some. I think Joel, did you see the elliptical? I don't think you did.
Yes, it was in your giant ass. It was in your tiny little storage unit originally. Remember, it was taking up all the room.
Thank you, Fred.
Nobody else's hair though.
I know, right? I can. Next time, I will show you the hair products. I'm pretty sure that's why we have our guest, Mike. Notes and Tones to find out my
hair, so.
Right hair techniques. So, anyways, so Joel rants, the elliptical machine, right? We're not going to talk about this. Chris, the Groove Seeker, had his topic, which is expanding on the Vinyl Tag 2026 Jazz Music Matters. I'm going to let Chris and our guest, Mike, Notes and Tones, run with it, and I believe we'll all interject, right? Is that a good intro?
Yeah, that's a great intro. So first off, Mike, Notes and Tones, thanks for joining us. This is long overdue. I think we're all big fans of you.
Inviting me on.
Yeah, and I couldn't think of a better person to have on. So yeah, I think. By the way, Dom's Vinyl Tag video just posted. It's great. You guys should check it out. She plugged for.
Put it in the chat.
I actually answered that question.
I'm not.
and I showed the least jazz record I could possibly show.
Really.
Yeah. Yes.
Well, this is the thing about. So first off, I thought it was a very cool question to ask. In the Vinyl Tag, it was tough to answer because it was in the back end of the Vinyl Tag, and it was 3 reasons why jazz is important, and to me, one reason's a full-length video, right? For a lot of us who listen to the genre, respect the genre, both or whatever, it's a pretty loaded answer. And the thing I found interesting was obviously a lot of different reasons that people have kind of put forth, but I didn't find a tag yet of someone saying it doesn't matter. Right. And I was hoping that we'd get some people to speak up and say I don't think it matters. And this is why. So maybe we'll get some of that tonight in the chat or maybe in our discussion. But yeah, I was pretty inspired by the question. I've thought about it quite a bit. I have a bunch of different reasons, which hopefully will bring out some great conversation. I know Mike's going to have a lot to say. Dom, obviously, I have a jazz listener. I think through osmosis, Joel is being kind of like forced into this a little bit and back on what
he'll still rant. He's still gonna.
I love jazz. I love jazz.
And of course, we have we have Rojas, Captain Rojas at the helm. So yeah, I mean, I think for me, everybody's gonna know my answer. Like, hell yeah, it matters, and I think it matters in a lot of different ways, which we'll get into. It matters sociologically. It certainly matters. I think it matters through the impact on even modern music and modern musicians. And I think where it most impacts us as a collective here is it's got a huge impact on the vinyl community, and it's got a huge impact on vinyl reissues and reproductions as well. So high level for me, I think it matters. Like, I'm going to kick it to Dom. Like, I got some of your answers in your tag, cheap plug here, but I'm assuming you think jazz obviously matters for a lot of different reasons as well.
Well, yeah. I mean, I think crappy modern country matters too. I just don't like it. I mean, I just think it's a sort of a strange way to put it. Like, does it matter? Like, yeah, obviously every art form matters. It's just a question of taste. But it certainly appeals to me in a lot of ways. You know, my little bit that I put onto it today, or in the taggy, was just I like being confronted with an art form or music in this case that will put me sort of, on my heels. And so, yeah, I do like some of the more experimental things, or I like being surprised by the music. I find it sort of like mind enhancing in a way. And yeah, it's fun to sort of see how you react to it. Like, maybe at first you don't like it, and that's sort of interesting. And then maybe you start to realize, no, maybe there's something interesting about this that I'm not giving it a chance. And the next thing you know, you sort of, invested in something and going down a new path in discovery. And there's really nothing quite like, there's really no music that does that better than all the various forms of jazz, whatever, even if you're into hard bop or you're into swing or you're into, fusion, there's
post bop.
Yes. Post bop, the most overused term, but yeah, of course, there's jazz. There's something for everyone. Doesn't everyone love that when you go to garage sale listing? There's something for everyone.
Well, does jazz make you like stare down at bodybuilders? Just heads up. Welcome, Elliot Cruz.
You might be able to get down with some jazz funk. Maybe some gnarly mid '70s jazz funk might. The bodybuilders might like that. I don't know. I'd like to see that.
So, Mike, I think, unless I'm misunderstanding your stance or your history, has jazz always been the dominant genre of music that you've listened to your whole life, or when did jazz come into your life and become the dominant music style?
Early 20s, 21. I did the 2021. It became like the I'd say the dominant form of music I listen to. But I listen to some of everything. When I first heard that question, my response was, why would someone why would someone ask that question? And part of it may be, sometimes you run into, and this happens with any like form of genre, you run into someone that fancies themselves an aficionado and they're a jackass or something, and it like turns you off, and you're like, it turns you off to that form of music, and and you just really you don't think it matters because of the individuals that you come into contact that proclaim how good that music is. That's the kind of thing that could like really turn someone off, where they're saying, this doesn't really matter. Those people, that type of person listens to jazz.
That's how I feel about classical for a long time, actually. So you've been listening to jazz since your early 20s.
Yeah.
If you can think back, was there ever a time where you felt like it mattered less than it does right now? Like almost like an ebb and flow in the scene, like where, you know, it kind of died out. There was nothing really happening, or it just didn't seem it wasn't as popular at some point, and you feel like there was some kind of resurgence.
No, because when I started listening, this is when they, it was like, I guess you could say, the sort of last iteration of what they were calling the Young Lions. I don't even really think they use that term anymore, thank goodness. But you had all those guys, the Marsalises, Terrence Blanchard, Donald Harrison, the Harper brothers, guys. You had young guys coming up, and that was a resurgence, and it was also like the last gasp of the major record companies signing jazz artists. So there was money being put out. But I don't think it's been a lull at any point. I think it's just been just like any other form of music. When the majors basically got out, it's more of run by independents now. And actually, I think that's like the best thing that happened to jazz, is that there are no major labels really supporting it, because the musicians have more choice in what they do, or they're more in control of their own projects. It's not like A&R people telling them what you got to do this, you got to do that. You see all these projects, and they're spearheaded by musicians.
Yeah. The last 10 years, we've seen a lot of these independent labels really take the forefront of like what's coming out in jazz music. I know some of it I followed, it seems like it's gone into more of like the head community. I think, the people listening to more like the jam band people seem like they're getting jazz. It seems like these days. That seems pretty new to me. Like in the early 2000s, I think it felt quieter to me. I think, Mike, you've been following it much closer through all these years. Like I can think about just like None Such releasing jazz records. Like my time at Warner Music, I can like thinking about what was coming out, and None Such was the only label releasing stuff, at least from that group. But
None Such. I'm trying to think. But you had like during that time, guys, and still to this day, like John Zorn. He had all his various labels, and was just like, and still is just putting out so much stuff. So I just think that with the decline of the major labels, the independents have taken, and they've actually done a good job. They've taken it and ran. Even the packaging of the records are better from the independents than they are from major labels. You get better artwork. It's just usually the majors is just some picture of a guy or a girl on the cover, and that's it. Nothing, no thought goes into it.
International Anthem just has to stop with those hype obies. Those are horrible.
Yeah.
Oh my God.
I think there should be like a moratorium on the obies.
Oh God, I agree. Their hype on there is just unbearable to read. But I love most of what they do is excellent. So
yeah.
Like I get this sense just from watching you over the years on Bums occasionally, kind of like watching what you post on Instagram. Which, by the way, everybody, it's a great follow. We should put a link to Mike's Instagram after the show, but. I get this sense, and correct me if I'm wrong, that you are highly aware of who's in the groups. And I find that you really tree together where those players go and say like, okay, they were on this record. I love this record. And now this drummer is here. So I'm going to check out this album. Is that, because to me, like I'm not hearing jazz on the radio. I don't hear jazz radio stations outside of like maybe college radio stations in the city, New York City. How are you kind of discovering what's new or what's being released? Are you hearing it first, or are you just going off reputation, or maybe both when you purchase it?
It's a little of both, but you have certain musicians that you follow, and then you'll see like someone new in their band, and then you begin to follow them. Like one of my favorite musicians, she has an album coming out. Actually, I got the copy early, but my copy is warped. This is a cellist. Her name is Temeka Reed. She was actually a member of the is a member of the AACM, and so I heard her, on she was on one of their recordings, and then she was in I saw her in another group. She performs a lot in her group, her quartet right now. Mary Halverson plays in that. So there's another
awesome.
musician.
Okay, yeah.
There's a drummer that I really like, Thomas Fujiwara, who also plays in her group. And, they play on each other's recordings. And then, I'll pick up one of, Thomas Fujiwara's recording. And there's someone else that I might not be familiar with. But yeah, all these bands, the people that, I've known or I've heard in other groups. And that tells you, who's who's new, and also like the clubs I go to. Like my main club is the Jazz Gallery, and they have this program where established musicians do mentorship for young musicians. Like the drummer Jonathan Blake, he was a mentor for this young pianist who has an album coming out soon. So that's how you find it's good. The way it is now, where when I first started listening, you're really dependent upon critics saying that this person is the new hot shot, and and a lot of them are just that's what the record company told me.
I'm curious. I saw Pat's radio comment about how many essential jazz records really are there. That's an interesting thought, because if you were to see my 10 favorite or essential record, essential is always a dangerous and silly term, really, but my 10 essential records would be very different from what others might say. And I'm not trying to say anything.
So you would own 10 copies of Kind of Blue, the corrected version, the uncorrected version, the one that was claimed to be the corrected version.
Yes, the 80s reissue, need it.
The digital remastered
the many
version.
Reissue. Yeah, come on.
Well, that's all to your point. I don't think my 10. I don't think we'd have one that overlapped. Maybe one or two Joe Henderson have an opportunity to overlap.
I agree, but there is one that comes up to me that I've seen shown the most across all different types of people in this VC that I've seen come up through everyone, and I think, can anyone guess what that might be? According to my idea, according to what I've seen.
Wait, so you agree with it or don't agree with it?
No, I'm saying there's one record that almost unanimously everyone's like, yeah, that thing's amazing. It is essential.
Love Supreme.
Love Supreme, yeah.
That's one, and I guess the other one would be Out to Lunch. I think those two.
Out to Lunch, yeah.
I think everyone unanimously, correct me if I'm wrong, I've never heard anyone say, I feel like I've heard more positive unanimous for Out to Lunch than the Love Supreme even, but.
Well, I think I would be scared to put a Love Supreme. I would.
It's a different record. It's a very different record.
I would be scared to put a Love Supreme in like a recommended 10 essential list to somebody, because I think it would totally so people would be lost on it. In my personal I feel like I would need to, if I had to go down to 10 records, I would want to have that. But I don't think I've ever. I've said a bit of a
deep end record.
Yeah, people have said this is the best John Coltrane. I'm like, yes, it might be, but it's not where you should start, which is kind of hard to say about an artist, right? Like, I don't think you should go there first. You should go here and then kind of work your way or work towards like listening to that. But that's a good point. So Joel, you at Static ATX, obviously you have a physical store. We're gonna cheap plug you now. What's been your experience?
Where's your 10 essential jazz end cap? Where can we see that?
What's your experience with people coming into the store asking for jazz? Does it happen often?
No, but
No one?
is my mic fine? I
Yeah.
did. Yeah, I changed the setting.
You're not getting out of this.
So I originally didn't have any jazz in the store when I was doing online, because I knew online I couldn't really compete with the powers that be online. So, but when I opened up the store, I wanted to, but I started out with just like what I viewed as the essential. I had like Miles Davis, John Coltrane, Herbie Hancock, and that was pretty much mainly it that I had, because I just wanted to dabble and see, like, do I have any customers going to buy any jazz? And I didn't. So I kind of stopped there. Every once in a while, Chris, when you tell me about an album, I would order two. Like I ordered one for you and then one for the store. So it's growing a little bit like that. But so far, I've sold two jazz records. I sold my one copy of Kind of Blue that I had, and then wanted to ask you. We can talk about it later if you want, but I'm curious how you feel about this artist Leve. It's like a newer. She's a female jazz artist.
LaFay?
I don't really follow her. You know, I don't get upset when people like say, you know, there's some people, there's an argument from people, different groups saying, is she a jazz artist? Is she, or she is a jazz artist, she's not a jazz artist. It doesn't even bother, because the term jazz it's everything and nothing at the same time. So I don't even, it doesn't even bother me, who they group into it. But Joel, I just wanted to ask you, when you said you sold some two jazz records, they were reissues, or?
Yeah. I had a Kind of Blue. I just bought whatever the latest reissue of Kind of Blue was, so that sold. And then the Leve, and it wasn't a reissue because it's a new album that just came out.
Yeah, because I was going to say, like, they're like there's a modern day a contemporary guy, and I've been following him for a number of years. This guy James Brandon Lewis, who he does stuff with the Mystetics, and one of the guys from that group, I believe, was with Fugazi.
The rhythm section. It's the rhythm section with James Brandon Lewis. Yeah.
That might be something that would appeal to someone that doesn't want to like buy a Kind of Blue or something like that.
Yeah.
It has that edge, that punk edge, not necessarily just your straight ahead jazz.
Yeah. I mean, for me personally, I like jazz. I mean, I know we were joking around earlier, but I do. But it's just not a style of music that I dove deep into. Like, you know what I mean? Like, to me, jazz is still just jazz. Versus, like, if you talk to me about like other kinds of electronic music, I can break it down to the different subgenres and talk about eras and stuff like that. I just don't have that level of knowledge of jazz. But whenever someone puts on a jazz record, normally, like, it doesn't offend me or anything. Like, I enjoy listening to it.
I think it depends where you're coming from, like what music you like.
Right. Yeah.
Are you into more extreme music? Are you into pop music? Are you into rock, reggae? Like, there's a gateway into jazz on all these different avenues, depending on what you like. It really depends. That's what's sort of cool about it, actually.
Yeah, I mean, just like, and different people could point things out. Like, some of the best stuff that I've bought, just based on recommendations, have gone like Dom and Alex, stuff that Diamond Marimba. It's, just stuff, because and I say our tastes are like really different, but when they pick when they highlight a jazz record, it's usually like spot on, and it's something that I like
I just figured you had everything, Mike. That's cool.
That's what Dom showed. I don't know. It was months ago. You showed the Jay Hoggard solo vibe.
Yeah, and Indian navigation.
Yeah, and I didn't have that, and I love solo. I actually love a lot of solo work anyway.
Yeah.
But, so I picked that. I picked that up.
That's pretty nice and cheap. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I like that point about entry, because when I was working in the music store and someone came in and said, I want to get into jazz, I would always ask them what their favorite few of their favorite bands are. And depending on that, I might start them off in like fusion, or I might, or I might start them off in soul jazz if they're into hip hop and stuff like that. And that's how I got into jazz. I talked about numerous times. If it wasn't for a Tribe Called Quest and some of that like early 90s, mid 90s hip hop, I would have never looked at samples and been like, oh, what is this I'm listening to? And kind of investigated where that music was coming from. So that's what's so great. And Mike, you said jazz is everything and nothing at all. I had a history of jazz class like early in college, and the professor like had us define jazz, and his definition was jazz is a body of music and its approach to it. That defines nothing about its sound or anything that's like you can't describe it. And going back to I think Pat's Radio said this about like the essential jazz records and like getting a legendary player on an album, and that becomes essential. I think that's what's so crazy about, and I hate to use the word genre, but what's so crazy about this label of jazz is to me, it seems like it's never ending, and I still haven't gotten to the contemporary stuff that I want to get to. I don't feel like any other genre punches as consistently in deeper, lesser known stuff as it does in jazz. Like you could always find something interesting, where it's rock and it's a little bit more difficult to kind of hold things up, to the standard that's been set. So even if you don't go past a certain year, you're stuck in a certain era, like it just seems endless all around. It's I don't know if you guys feel that way, but there's always so much to discover. It's crazy.
Like I discovered Joshua Abrams through Natural Information Society 5-6 years ago, whatever it was. And I'm still going down that wormhole, and I'm still finding things like, and that's just one example. So, and then if you find someone in one of those groups, you're like, well, I love this player. Like, oh my God, like Jeff Parker. Oh my God, I'm going to be going forever.
I still haven't exhausted that whole, those whole Chicago guys.
Oh God, it's crazy.
And when I first started, I first really got into the Chicago guys through Ken Vandermark, and because he was doing stuff with Fred Anderson, and then you started all these other guys and women, offshoots of that. Mike Reed, another drummer from Chicago, who actually is a club owner. I think he owns 2 clubs in Chicago. And it's just I haven't even exhausted that one regional group, or regional group of musicians and their sound.
There's that Chicago Underground Quartet or Trio. There's different. I'm still looking for those records. Thrill Jockey put those out in like 2001. And they're actually going for a lot of money now, which is frustrating. But that Chicago scene's crazy. There's tons of goodies there.
Is Jeff Parker out of that Chicago scene? Yeah, it's funny. I just had him on today. I had the album. It's like an old picture. I don't know who's on the cover, but it's 2 people on the cover.
Yeah, that's good.
It's a killer album, and that's got like a little bit of hip hop influence to me. Like it's kind of like when I first heard it, I was like, "What is this?" And then like a low
international anthem, I think.
Yeah, and then it goes through. Yeah, I'll have to scoop that. I've just been streaming it. So I think we all agree from different perspectives that it matters. But Mike, like, what's one thing and any reason why you think the genre is important? Like, what really resonates with you as someone who's grown up with it and has been listening to it for nearly 50 years?
I mean, it's actually, if you go back and, the way I look at the history of it, I know we're no longer in the 20th century, but it was, it came right in at the 20th century, the beginning of the 20th century, and with all the technology, with record players, film, it all came in, jazz came in with that. And it also, the roots of the music are, I would say one of the important roots of the music is the blues. And that's about as American as you can get, and it doesn't matter, what form of music you listen to. You don't have to listen to jazz, but you know the blues. Yeah.
Yeah, I think so. You bring up initially a point about the blues and jazz connection. I think for me, at least, I think there's I don't want to say a generation, but there's a lineage of musicians, and I don't care what they play. I don't care if you were in the Doors, you were in the Rolling Stones, you were in the Motown rhythm section, you were in Iron Maiden. I think all of those musicians have some kind of influence from jazz. Maybe they don't play the sound, but they play the technique, and most of them cite it. Even, one of my favorite things to do is hear like a rock musician talk about their influence, and it's 4 jazz musicians. They don't play anything that resembles what you think jazz sounds like,
right.
But it obviously has influenced that genre. So it's kind of interesting how like the blues is so heavily rooted in jazz, and then jazz is so literally heavily rooted, in my opinion, everything else that's being produced. I mean, everything. Even to the poppiest stuff, there's jazz elements to it. And I think that's what makes it extremely essential, because it's hard to remove that from American music, but I think it's also hard to remove it from music outside of the US as well. I think there's just a high regard and a high attention to the past and what people were doing. You could hear a rock musician like, oh, it's a jazz lick you just played, or it's a, I'm not a musician, I always say that, but like, that sounds like like the drummer's playing some kind of jazz breakdown or whatever, how people describe it. So it's kind of cemented in a lot of that stuff.
I agree.
So are you selling any of those Natural Information Society records, Joel? Have you sold any of those?
No, but that guy that came in the store today, he was asking me about jazz. He didn't know what they were. He didn't know who Natural Information Society was, and I just
curious what he thinks of them. Like the latest one is maybe not a good entry point, but it's awesome, I think. So
yeah. I'm trying. What would be a good entry point for them?
That's a good question. I might say the first Joshua Abrams solo album. I think it's just called Natural Information. Is a beauty, and otherwise, it's hard to say.
It's hard.
This comment here. Do you see this comment here?
Never happened. Well, we also have some jazz heads. Mark Lassman and Rich DG Mono is here.
Yeah.
So
welcome. Yeah.
Yeah. We got to appeal to the jazz heads.
Well, going back to Mike, what Mike raised about the vinyl tag, I got the same impression. Actually, I think David Atkinson was looking for somebody to challenge that it matters, and I couldn't find any tags that did. I think he was trying to.
Well, you tried to goad me into doing it.
I did.
Just so Chad knows, he was trying to get me. He was like, "You can be the one that says you don't like jazz," and I'm like, "Why would I say that?"
not that you don't like it. It's just it doesn't matter. Well, because there's a lot. I think there's a
no, but I think it does matter.
Like there's a lot of the VC that's like, go ahead, Joel. My bad.
Well, no, I mean the point that you were making before. It's like your favorite musician was inspired by jazz. You hear it all the time. Like I remember hearing Henry Rollins talk about jazz like way back, like in the early '90s. And one of my favorite, there's an industrial band that I like. If you see him live, you're gonna think it's like New Boughton, something strange like that. But his collection at home is jazz. Like he loves listening to jazz. And when I found that, I was like, wait, hold on. You're like in this gigantic industrial band. Like that's what you're known for, but you're at home listening to jazz. And it was, that's kind of all I got to say.
See, but that's what Chase is saying. That's like the silly like stereotype about jazz listeners. That's
Oh, okay. I see what he's saying. Hey, but no, hey,
That-
Mike. Before I don't want this to get away. I'm really into the cello. So you mentioned Tomika Reed. If you could send me like a recommendation later of some of her best work.
Yeah, sure. Yeah, not a problem. Not a problem. Actually,
she appears on a Natural Information Society record, actually.
yeah. Hold on.
Reprehending Joel.
When you go back to Chasing Records comment, I know like
This is the new one.
Oh, I gotta
Tomika
check
Reed.
that.
Yeah, this one is actually not due out until It's February, but they're shipping them out now. And yeah, I got my copy Saturday, but it's badly warped, and it's not because
it's
of it's not because of the label. It's because of I guess you say my doorman put it on the radiator.
Oh,
The back is on the radiator.
that'll do it.
Yeah.
They're really going for the 80s layout on that sleeve. That's pretty funny.
Yeah. This is an independent label called Out of Your Heads Records, and they do a pretty good job. They had a number of top releases last year, and it's called Dance Skip Hop.
Who are the players on there?
Okay, yeah, her group is Mary Howison on guitar, Tomas Fujiwara on drums, and Jason, I want to say Robike on bass. And
Howlison's awesome.
She's had this quartet for, I think this is their third or fourth release. I want to say fourth. So she's been with them for a number of years. And I saw her about a week ago. She was she had two groups at Winter Jazz Fest. The group I saw was called the Hempel String Tet. And because it's based on the work of Julius Hempel.
Yeah.
This alto saxophonist, composer, but it was a string. It was a two violins, viola, and cello, and they did Mingus. They did a lot of Mingus, and it was really cool.
Mingus is he'll use cello quite a bit.
Yeah.
Yeah. Sorry, I went down the rabbit hole. I'm trying to find these albums where I can get them from. Force Exposure has a few of them, but not the quartet. So I'm trying to figure out where I can get them from.
Yeah, they probably don't have this quartet album right here because, like I said, the release date is actually February. In February. But like some of these, like this label, if they get them in like ahead of time, they just ship them out.
That's great.
So here's a question from Stevie. Do you want to answer this?
I'll go first, I guess. How do I feel about it? I don't feel about it in general. I have very select artists that I enjoy listening to, and I'll delve into, but it's mostly like the Mount Rushmore type stuff. Like I'm not crazy about vocal jazz.
Gives you a tummy
just in
ache?
general.
Is that what you're saying?
Say it again.
Gives you a tummy ache? Is that what you're saying?
No, it doesn't. It doesn't like. It just doesn't move. It just doesn't move me. I don't know.
Okay. I can show you a record. Let me see if I can.
Go ahead, Jason.
Let me see. How do I do this? How do I make myself big again? Okay, so I went to Magic Isles, which is a international record shop. Now, Jeremy, don't get embarrassed while you're listening to this. Okay, my buddy's over there. As I made him play this record, this Polish jazz record by Ursula, and it's called Future Talk. So if you look at this cover, let me see if I can get the glare out. It looks pretty cool, right? Pretty amazing, like with this photo, like this exposure, right? And the record, let me back up here, came out in 1979, and it is vocal jazz, definitely. And the style they're saying is post-bop fusion, 79, Polish. and it sounded really good. And actually, if you look at the players here, like John Abercrombie, Marcus Miller, I mean, seriously, Marcus Miller is not going to, when he's on board, he's not going to mess this up,
Yeah.
And I'm pretty sure no one ever told, I don't really talk like this, like, oh my gosh. And it's, for all the audiophiles watching us, and it's mastered by Robert Ludwig, okay? This ain't no Kevin Gray thing. This is Bob Ludwig, okay? But anyway, it was like going into this more return to forever kind of thing with the vocal thing, and I just wasn't in the mood, and I had to tell the guy who was playing the record for me. I was like, he's like, oh, you don't like this right now? I was like, well, I'm not in that Steely Dan moment right now, with this singing. But actually, it is like in a great record. Like I would totally recommend it. Definitely, it was a good record, but I just wasn't into it that day. Maybe I had too much cheese danishes. That's why. All right. Okay. Groove Seeker, go.
No, Mike, Dom, where do you guys stand on vocal jazz?
Well, I'm glad you asked. Well, I did a whole video on this actually, but very specific artists, Gene Lee, June Tyson, Linda Chirac. So we're talking about a little bit left of center. And I sort of focused and highlighted all of the ones that were the most sort of brilliant to me. So I don't, well, that's not true. Like I like Dodo Green quite a bit. I grew up when I was in college, I used to go to Buffalo and see Dodo Green, who's from Buffalo. Wow. And she has one record on Blue Note?
Yeah, she was the for years it was just her.
And what's her name? Sheila Jordan
were the only vocal recordings that Blue Note released. Yeah.
Well, we used to go to the home of the Buffalo Wings, the Anchor Bar, and we would see her on Friday nights. Dodo Green, she was there with a band, and you could go. And she was probably at this time, this is like 1998 to 2000. I don't know. She was in her mid to late 70s, but she was fiery and she was on it. And we'd go there with my, with the idiot friends I was with and get Buffalo Wings and see this jazz like legend really, but no one really thought of her that way. But that's where she was every Friday at the Anchor Bar in Buffalo. So I do like that style of jazz. I mean, Billie Holiday is an incredible vocalist, but these days I stick to sort of the more avant-garde, and Gene Lee is an exceptional vocalist. Conspiracy. Everyone should check out that record if you don't know it.
Yeah. But it's funny, how, when you mentioned Gene Lee, and I do too, you associate it with the avant-garde.
Yeah.
But when I first, listened to Gene Lee, I didn't know she was avant-garde or anything like that, because I picked up some Mal Waldron Gene Lee recording. I picked it up because it was Mal Waldron on it.
Yeah.
And there was a vocalist. And I liked the vocalist. I didn't associate her with being avant-garde or anything like that. I just, this woman on this Mal Waldron album that I happen to like. And then I find out, she's, associated with, avant-garde.
Well, if you listen to Conspiracy, it's such a patient and there's so much space in it. It's not an avant-garde record, it's a spiritual record. And if for anyone who's scared off by that stuff, that record will put you into a beautiful place. It's a stunner.
Yeah.
So Dom, like I guess the vocal jazz that you're into, you're not going to see at a cocktail bar. It's not that stereotypical like
no.
Yeah.
I wouldn't say so. But that's sort of what I was seeing when I was like 20 years old. But
yeah. Well, it's your entry point.
Yeah, absolutely. I'll put the link to my video just in case anyone wants to see that thing.
But I like I like vocal jazz. I like vocalists, and I like just the whole spectrum of the ones that are associated with jazz. I love Armstrong's vocals. I think they're freaking fabulous. I think what he does is fabulous. Cassandra Wilson is one of my favorite vocalists. And some of her recordings, the one are sort of underrated. Like her like Blue Skies. I'd never heard anyone in the VC talk about Blue Skies, and that's an amazing record because it's who are the musicians? It's Terry Lynn Carrington on drums, Mulgrew Miller on piano, and Lonnie Plaxico on bass. And what's so good about it is that, it's not like a vocalist being backed up by a trio. It's like they're a freaking quartet. I mean, and it's just it's amazing how, she's really, in that group of musicians on that album. They're not just like, she's just not like fronting a trio. And
well, you bring up a beautiful point. I guess that's where I should have been more specific, but I didn't have the thought with me, is that somebody like Cassandra Wilson, you said just so perfectly, she's part of the group. She's not out in front of the group. And that's kind of like the vocal jazz that I like, the phrasing. And I love, I mean, I think that album was like the late 80s, right? She's doing a lot of, I don't want to say standards, but popular. But she's recreating them.
Right, exactly.
To make them her own. And even like her late 90s, early 2000s stuff, she's doing like Dylan covers and stuff like that, and just mind-blowing versions of these songs, like totally reimagined as she's part of the group. Like, I don't think sometimes the group can drive and the vocalist can fill in, or vice versa, but like you said, it's like one cohesive unit with the band on most of our records.
Now, Stunty mentioned the vocalist in his where's this comment?
Yeah, I was just going to talk about that comment. Irene AB.
I love her.
You do?
Oh,
okay.
I have friends that with Steve. They're like, there's with Steve Lacy, who was her husband. They go, I can listen to Steve Lacy records without her.
Yeah,
I can't listen to the ones with her.
Just today, I was listening to one, Troubles, with Steve Potts and Lacy, and she's all over that thing singing. Joel, that's what I want you to check out is Irene AB. That'll be a test if you like vocal jazz, I think. No, she's not for everyone, that's for sure.
No, definitely not for everyone.
I'm not sure if I really like it. I can appreciate it, but
I mean, I have so much Lacey when she's in the group. I really like her.
Okay.
And it just works, to me, that dynamic and that, that group, her, Lacey, and, the musicians that they played with, it just works so well. She's a part of that group, so.
She plays violin too, is that right?
Yeah. Violin or cello. I mean, I'm not sure.
I gotta go find the record.
I can't.
So it sounds like, obviously we respect some of the standard legends and stuff, but it does sound like we're the three of us on touching different points on the map here are looking at jazz vocalists that are really the vocals are an extra instrument in the band, right? Mm-hmm. Something along those lines. Like some of the cookie cutter stuff, I just don't like. When people say like Sinatra's like a jazz vocalist, I'm like, yeah, he's like a jazz style vocalist, but to me, it like turns me off in a way. Like, I know he's backed by jazz musicians and I respect that and stuff, but it's like I don't think he should be the face of jazz vocals like a lot of people do as low hanging fruit.
But I mean, I don't think he was. People are trying to use him as the face of jazz vocals. I mean, he had a relationship with I think jazz musicians respected him. Billie Holiday loved him. He loved Billie Holiday. And they're both and I guess you could say they're both torch singers. In that sense. So even though Billie Holiday is a quote unquote jazz singer, they have that affinity across I guess genres.
Yeah, that's true.
Mm-hmm.
Alan always says, "What about your Chet Baker albums?" Or sorry, go ahead, Jason.
Yeah, no, that's what I was going to say. It was just the Chet Baker. Do you guys regard him as a great singer? You better say yes. You're on this panel now.
I have a very unpopular hot take. I don't.
Mike, you hate him? You think he's?
I don't hate him. I don't hate him. I just don't regard him as a great, vocalist.
I'd rather listen to Kenny Dorham sing.
Good one.
That's
Good one.
evil.
Good.
I know that record.
Oh,
Do you guys like Sade? Do you consider her to be jazz?
I like her a lot. I don't consider her
Influence,
jazz.
maybe.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But I definitely like her a lot. Yeah.
But not even smooth jazz? You couldn't even call it smooth jazz? Or soulful jazz?
You just wait, Joe. They're going to have a singing Kenny G record. It's going to sell out.
So
Oh, I do have my Kenny G record.
I think,
What do
I
you
think,
feel about
I think,
this? Great, one of the great albums.
That's a good
Can
question.
you show it again?
Yeah.
Show it again.
Listen, those of you who know me know why this was so close, and I could just grab it really quick. This was not planned. This CD's been on my desk for the last 2 weeks because it's actually Jason's. I had to go give it to him.
Did you just get a root canal and they gave that to you?
This is one of the greatest albums, period, of any genre.
Best-selling jazz artist ever, right?
This is really good album, guys. I'm being dead serious.
Why is it a good album, Joel? Why?
It really helped me sleep when I was a teenager.
Nice, Dave. Yeah, how about some Patty Waters? Yeah.
Well, and you know,
But Joel, your question on Sade as a band isn't foolish because all those musicians have jazz chops. Michael Bolton, like
What are you doing, Joel?
He's trying to derail. As
I
usual.
love Sade. I love Sade, then. And I'm going to check out Tamika Reed, right?
Yeah.
you should check out Cassandra Wilson.
Listen, I've got Tamika Reed on my list. I have the Boren Der Club of Gore. Someone said it's jazz that I would like. Do you know? Are they fucking with me? I don't know.
That's Jose. I don't know.
It says it's dark jazz from Germany.
I don't know that band. Don't know it.
Enough.
And then I have Irene Abbey.
Yeah, I would love to hear what you think.
I might say Gene Lee before Irene Abbey, but
You told me it was my test. I have to.
it's okay. See how much hair you have left when you're done.
How much hair I have left?
Yeah.
Dude, Jeremy, why do you have to ask? Everybody should have this record. Not just this record, the two of them together. Like they go together. They should just be in a box set by itself. Like there should be a permanent rubber band.
At Guantanamo Bay, or
Yes.
Oh, jeez.
Some good fusion. I like the question of fusion though. That's another good avenue.
Yeah, someone said, what fusion record would you recommend?
oh man,
I would say those early 80s John Sermon records are a great place to go on ECM.
Well, see, I don't know why I didn't think of those as fusion. Yeah.
I guess they're not classic fusion, but
Yeah.
I think of them as like crossing a bridge or
Yeah.
bridging the gap, I should say.
Mhm.
I have a different take that's less specific on that question. Couldn't you just give somebody Miles's discography, right, and say, I want to hear this style, and you could just point to a record. I want to hear this style. Okay, go listen to this record. Like, I would tend to say, like, I'm not saying that's like has the ultimate fusion albums or like electric albums, but I feel like that's one artist that you can say, like, here's a dozen albums that's going to cover you on many styles, and then from there, what you like, I'll give you the next thing.
Yeah, I mean, who else covered that much of time? That amount of time.
I think Chris really wants to be someone's like jazz guru.
No way.
Really?
Always at the ready to give the right recommendation.
Just go buy old Rolling Stone magazines. That's the equivalent of my jazz guru ability.
There's another good one.
I do keep someone keeps mentioning in the chat Mahavishnu Orchestra. I had a customer come in and ask me for that too, which I didn't have because they would have had to been used. What do you feel about them?
Mm-hmm. John McLaughlin.
Yeah, they're excellent. I have no problem with them. I mean, people that know more about that area of jazz than I do. But
Mhm.
you know, I have my fusion that I like, that I'm into, and it's just based on, you know, the musician. You know, how I connect with that musician.
If you're into like progressive rock, that's a good place to go.
I have two. Do you all? I have two questions. They're going to seem really silly, but I'm serious about them. Are you all just yes or no a fan of Miles Davis?
Sure.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
What if you were turning someone on to Miles? What album would you recommend?
I love Get Up On It.
Yeah. For you, Joel.
No, just in general.
See, I don't know. I can't. I would just. I don't know. I can't do in general. I would just say go listen to Kind of Blue, but that might totally turn somebody off.
The corrected speech version, I hope.
Yeah.
I hope.
Yeah. That's why I would have to know who it's for. I have to like know the person a little bit and say, okay, try this.
Oh, man.
Okay, well, just for the sake of the question, for me, what's the one?
I would give you Jack Johnson Around the Corner. Yeah, I feel like
These are all great. I mean,
Miles Davis. It's called Jack Corner. What's
Jack Johnson.
Jack Johnson, and the other one is On the Corner.
Okay,
but this is me knowing you. If I didn't know you, it's hard.
So
How
if
would
you
you
didn't
answer
know
that,
him,
Mike?
you would be like Kind of Blue, right? You would say that.
Kind of Blue. I'd be like Kind of Blue, but I'm not going to tell you which version to go get.
You know, that's cool. Yeah. I've never recommended Kind of Blue to anyone as a Miles. You know what it was, because it's just I didn't come to Miles through Kind of Blue either. So that's probably why. You know,
Where did you come from with Miles then? Where did you?
Gosh, the first Miles I bought was the one. It's the Prestige where they had like the blue and green cover. I can't remember the name. The name
Collector's Items, is that it? Was it the bottle?
Nah, it was. Oh God, I can bring it up.
it was something on
Or is it
Prestige
bags?
for me.
Yeah, it was on
Prestige,
Prestige, and you know, and I never had like a guru or someone to tell me, you know, you should listen to this. I just went to a record bin, and you know, there's a Hot Five. There's you know, Miles Davis. You know, it was just, you know, what was there. You know, when I first started listening, and what was in the library bin, and that's, you know, so I never had like, you know, my approach to listening was never chronological or based in one, you know, like I didn't start, you know, necessarily with bebop and then go to hard bop. You know, I start in the Hot Fives I listen to at the same time as I'm listening to a Miles Davis or whatever, because just like I had no one saying this is what you have to listen to.
Yeah.
Big Fun's
That's how
awesome.
I came across Steve Lacy, because no one was telling me that, you know, that this guy, you know, who played with who played, you know, the disciple of Thelonious Monk and did what he did at Prestige, was also doing all this other stuff, you know, pushing boundaries. No one, there it was in the record band.
I kind of had the same thing. It was like, oh, I hear jazz around and I like it. So who's like the most important jazz artist? You look it up. Oh, it's Miles Davis. Okay. So like I vividly remember like choosing between like Milestones and Bitches Brew, like for my first time. And I just happened to grab Milestones, and I go back and grab Bitches Brew. And I thought guy thought I got the wrong artist. I was like, what the hell is this? Like, I didn't know. So I'm the same way. Like, I didn't go say like, okay, I'm going to get into Miles Davis. I'm going to go from 1953 or whatever all the way through. It just didn't happen that way. It's hard, it's a tough question to answer, Joel. Plus, the guy's got like 47 albums. It's like,
that's why it's just you know, it's just a general thing to help me get to know you a little bit better.
It goes back to the Coltrane discussion, though. Like I guess the universal thought is that I Love Supreme is his masterpiece, which is fine, but it's definitely not the first record I would give somebody by Coltrane. Yeah. It's like not even close. I think I'd give 5 other albums before I even suggested.
Yeah, the first Miles Davis I picked up was the new Miles Davis Quintet.
So that's the blue or the green one. That's the
I had a I had a blue cover on.
Yeah.
But it was issued in blue and green covers. But I know where I picked. I still remember where I picked it up. I was in Okinawa. I was in what do they call it? The military PX, and there it was. I picked it up. That was the first Miles vinyl that I picked up.
And was Miles like the first or one of the first jazz musicians that got you started, or did you, like you said, you came in with like Wynton and all those guys? I guess that was in the 80s. Was Miles already on your radar, or you went back to Miles after those guys?
No, around the same time. Actually, I started listening. I guess you could say it was sort of a little bit of smooth. I don't want to say smooth, but like John Schofield, Electric Outlet, or I remember because I had to do like a 24-hour like duty once, and that means just sitting at a desk. When I was in the military, and I'm playing this radio station out of San Diego, and it's a jazz station, but they're playing like John Schofield, Electric Outlet, and Michael Franks and stuff like that. And I'm listening to it, and I'm going, and something. The music that they were playing, I'm like, is that what jazz is? Is that jazz? Does that include jazz? And then I got curious, and I went from there on my own. I just I started listening to Miles, Monk, Modern Jazz Quartet. That was what was either available in the library or in the store. On the base.
What were your roots in music before jazz? What were you listening to?
A lot of R&B, funk. Big into Rick James, Prince. And I was the only one listening to Prince out of the crew that I grew up with. They knew the hits, but they didn't. They weren't listening Uptown and all those songs like that. That was just not my groups. They were into hardcore hip hop. And I was more R&B, like Rick James. I had a group of friends that were into Parliament Funkadelic, and then I had other ones that really weren't. But
do you feel like that stuff that you were listening to, did that inform your early introductions to jazz at all, or you just heard jazz and you kind of broke off that path? You were like, oh, this is something different and I like it, or did you feel there was some kind of connection between those two?
I didn't think of it as a connection between the two until when I really started listening. Then I went, then I went back and started drawing connections and reading about how things are connected. But my parents had jazz albums in their collection and stuff like that. But they're more the Stanley Turrentine stuff. Even though I didn't listen to it when my parents had it, growing up, and that came later. But and of course you talk about someone like Grover Washington Jr. That was he was always being played.
So your parents were more into I don't want to disrespect the sound, but more of popular jazz. They weren't. Did they have Blue Notes and Impulse and stuff like that, or was it just more mainstream?
No Impulse. Maybe some. I don't even think Blue Note, but I just, unless it was Stanley Turrentine. I mean, Stanley Turrentine was he was like you know, I hate to say it, and you talk about jazz. He's like a working class jazz, you know, hero, you know, because you would hear like people, you know, like guys that were, you know, older guys, you know, they had like a, you know, they thought the world of him. You know, they called him. They didn't say like Stanley Tarantino or anything. They was like T. T has a new record out. You know, he's the music that was played at like the bar and grill. You know,
Yeah.
on the corner. You know,
Yeah.
people. You know that phrase like you know, sort of in jazz, it's attributed to Art Blakey. Music should wash away the dust of everyday life. That's what like Stanley Tarantino was to those people. You know,
Yeah.
I get off work. I want to have like you know, doers or something. I want to have my drink. I want to drink some whiskey. I want to just, you know, relax, listen to something. You know, it's not too taxing, but you know, but moves me. And Stanley Turrentine was that guy. And they followed him. You know, you know, from the way to the you know, yeah, that was their guy.
Yeah. So like just to use so that's now if I'm remembering like chronologically, that's like post Lee Morgan Sidewinder, right? So like that probably had some mainstream appeal as well, and then Turrentine kind of rode after that, or Turrentine was always popular even before that happened.
He was all. I mean, I would say he was always popular. You know, he had you know, he had his group. You know, he just had his people. You know, and you know, like you know, they know, like they would talk about Coltrane, but they wouldn't talk about Coltrane. You know,
Mhm.
and if it was Coltrane, it's going to be ballads or Johnny Hartman. You know,
Right. Yeah.
it's not going to be, you know, it's not going to be not even Love Supreme. You know that it's going to be, you know, and maybe some of and you know some of the early Atlantic stuff. My favorite things.
My favorite things are yeah, or Giant Steps or something.
Right.
Not
even that much Giant Steps. Not even that much Giant Steps. You know.
No. What about Donald Byrd? Was he? What about Donald Byrd? Does he have that same appeal that Turrentine had?
It's yes, and also he had Donald Byrd had you know, I guess you could say sort of even younger people than Stanley Turrentine. You know, like some of my friends that I grew up with, their brothers that were in college, those were the Donald Byrd guys. You know, those were the Donald Byrd guys. Whereas, you know, my parents were the Stanley Turrentine people. I mean, you know, there's crossover and stuff, but you know, but yeah, my friends' brothers that were in college and stuff were Donald Byrd. You know, Donald Byrd and Blackbirds. You know, my Zell brothers. That was their thing.
Nice. Yeah, see, it's interesting, like, because obviously I wasn't around then, right? So everything I'm reading is like very, you could read about it historically and like this happened in this year. That only tells you when it was released. It doesn't tell you like the cultural arc of what people were listening to, what impact it had. Mm-hmm. You only get kind of like the critic summary of this is why this was important. But it's interesting to hear, like, because if your parents are maybe a few years older, it changes their whole makeup of what they were listening to. Maybe it was a Coltrane household, right? Maybe it was a Monk or a Miles household, but just being a few years later, it becomes like a Stanley scene. And like, that's what, like you said, it was accessible. Not that that's not downplaying his playing or the complexity of his records, how great they are. It just means it was just popular appeal at that point. So yeah, that's interesting. Dom, what I know you gave some brief answers in your tag today, but maybe get more of an arena to expand on it. Like, how has jazz informed you on music and how it's shaped your taste I mean, you have been through all types of genres. You've been doing this a long time, being infatuated with music, being in a band. Like, talk about your experience and why you think that matters.
I mean, I got into it just from being given a bunch of records when I was 19, 20. I've told the story before, but we cleaned out my great uncle's apartment in East Williamsburg, or I guess it would be Brooklyn, and I was just forced to take all these records, and I learned about it from there. I didn't know anything about jazz, but I was like, well, I'm kind of curious about playing these records, so let's play them. And I still have that jazz collection. It's a lot of the early Prestige stuff, Sonny Rollins, Monk, Miles, that kind of thing. And so I got into it from there, and from there I started playing alto saxophone. I played that in college, and I started studying from there. I never was that great, or good. But I got into it, and I listened to Giant Steps all the time. Like, that was my first like Coltrane real piece that I really went crazy with. I just listened to that all the time. And the Monk and Coltrane record, that whatever that one is on Riverside, or is it Riverside? Whatever that is, Monk Coltrane.
Yeah.
That's on Riverside. There's Monk Coltrane. There's Monk Coltrane at Town Hall. I think there's two on
No,
Riverside.
it's the Riverside.
Yeah, it's the one with the brownish.
Yeah, it's I still have that. Like, so I got into it just from being dumped a bunch of records on me, and then from there I got super curious. Mingus was the one I sort of did the biggest deep dive with the first time. Like, that was the one I remember going a little bit further into, and like, because I really liked that he was like a difficult character, and everyone sort of had stories about him, and he was a composer, and he just seemed like a real punk,
Yeah.
And obviously there was two sides to that coin, but I was very fascinated by him, and I used to love hearing, you hear him like yelling shit on the records, like grunting, and
I love
getting
that.
the band to get going and stuff. I got into all that. And yeah, I don't know. I think just one thing led to another, and you slowly just start connecting the dots. I think I didn't go like deeper into like a second or third level down until a few years later, because I was getting into all different kinds of reggae and rock and all that stuff. So, but that's how I started. For me, Headhunters was another big. Someone mentioned Headhunters. That was one that was given to me early on that I felt like appealed to all kinds of people.
Yeah.
I don't have anything I was into all that early, the stuff everyone gets into like at first as well. This is the mid to late 90s. Like, it was kind of like what was in front of you at the time.
Well, that's why I asked Mike earlier on, like, did you ever see a lull in the scene, the movement? Because I remember, I'm a little bit younger than Dom, not by much, but I was grasping at all the staple releases too, Headhunters, Giant Steps, all that stuff, and like people thought I was crazy. Like, even people about like they're like, jazz, like why are you listening to this? Like, why are you?
I got that too. Yeah.
And that's why I was curious. Like,
what are you going to put on a smoking jacket? And you're just
yeah.
Well, maybe I will.
Like, are you doing heroin? I'm like, what? So that's why I was always curious. Like, I guess, like, for me, it's always been there since I was a kid, and especially a teenager and on. But that's why I always felt like there was like this lull in the 90s and the early 2000s. But to your point, Mike, like, if you were into it, you were into it, just like anybody else would be into something. I don't,
I mean, I don't think lull. I mean, it's a small percentage of the music market, marketplace, like 4% or whatever people maybe like identify themselves as like jazz aficionados or whatever. I don't know what exactly it is. But so I think, after, that all those years where it was, a major, part of the American music scene, I think it's reached a point where it just leveled out. It's where it is, and it's probably going to stay there. It may go up, it maybe go down a little, but it's not. I think it's at a point where, musicians are happy, understand their lot, so to speak, You know, you're not gonna be filling stadiums. You're gonna be scrapping. You know, even if
Yeah.
you're a successful jazz musician, you know that that's not financial security in any sense. You know,
Yeah.
and I just think it's it's where it's at, and it's gonna probably remain right there. And I don't think there's any lulls. I think people are happy, especially now, being able to do the projects that they can do without, you know, so much like A&R people saying, you know, you've got to go in this direction. I think it's a great time for jazz because there's so much out there, and there's so much variety.
They have freedom. Freedom is the ultimate thing, I think,
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
So Dom, like, I'm curious about this. This just occurred to me. So you were informed early on by the greats. I call it the Holy Trinity, some kind of makeup of Miles, Coltrane, Monk, and Mingus. Like, and rotate any of those three into the Holy Trinity. Do you go back to those Mingus records with the way your style, your listening ear has changed? Do you ever go back to that stuff?
It's been a minute, actually. I haven't listened to. I think the most recent Mingus I listened to was Mingus. But yeah, not a lot. It's very specific to that time. It's not that I don't like it anymore. It's just I'm sort of still there's still so much I don't know, you know, and I'm still sort of searching and seeking things out. I mean, European jazz is a pretty new rabbit hole for me to go down within the last 5, 6, 7 years, and that's there's so much to dig up there. Oh my God.
I listen to stuff from Europe mainly. I don't say mainly, but it's like a lot of musicians coming out of Helsinki and stuff like that. The We Jazz label and what they do. There's just a lot of good stuff coming out of there.
Yeah, there's all kinds of I mean, every country, I mean, you could really talk about something. So
yeah.
In America specifically, are the city so you guys talked about Chicago. Obviously, I know that there's clubs in New York and I guess like a scene in New York. Is there regional scenes around the U.S. or is Chicago and New York like the most dominant of the two, and like everybody kind of goes to those destinations to get involved? Like, you know anything about that?
Philadelphia is
Well,
still
Philly, yeah.
It's still vital, and what's with like I don't know about Chicago, but New York is like the place that musicians come to New York. A lot of musicians come to New York, whereas I'd say Philly and Chicago, those are places where they're from. New York is, people come to New York to go to, they'll come to New York to go to school, come to go to work. But, a lot of musicians, get there like like someone like Emmanuel Wilkins, say, alto player. He's from Philly. He was basically a child prodigy from Philadelphia. You look at Christian McBride, Philadelphia. Questlove, Kurt Rosenwinkel. All those guys are Philadelphia guys. And then they came to New York. New York is populated with musicians. But, at like growing up with the music, there are like numerous, cities that.
What about you, Chris? Table that turns on you.
For what?
What was your same question? Your entryway, or was it the Miles stuff?
No, it wasn't. So it was more like soul jazz because it was a hip hop kid. So you'd hear some kind of familiar like organ or flute or something, or you just be curious and I mean, Tribe Called Quest was so informative to me; it was ridiculous.
That's a
So I
great
was
point.
looking-
All the samples, right?
All the samples. So anything Tribe Called Quest, Diggable Planets was extremely informative. Those were the two main ones. Say it again. Funk Dubious. Yep. So all those guys. So like it was jazz, and it was a lot of 70s soul, but mostly the jazz. So you'd start off and say like, who's Lonnie Smith? And then I go try to find out who Lonnie Smith is. And then like you kind of work your way backwards. And you find out, it's like I was saying earlier, like you find out it's jazz, and then you're like, okay, well, who are the, just like if I got into rock when I was a kid, I was 10 years old, I'd want to know about Led Zeppelin and the Beatles. Well, you do the same thing with jazz. You go say like, oh, who's John Coltrane? Who's Louis Armstrong? You know, who's Miles Davis? And that's really my entry point. I had nobody around me. My parents weren't listening to that shit. Like my parents were, you know, WCBS FM, like pop, you know, like soul, like R&B, Cool and the Gang, all that shit, right? So I just figured it out. So I'd go to the record store, or I'd, you know, go to the mall, and I'd go to the jazz section that was like 3 rows long and say, okay, I can choose from Louis Armstrong, Miles Davis, John Coltrane, Billie Holiday, and Ella Fitzgerald. All right, well, I'll try Miles. And then from there, who's the next person I can find? What really changed things was like when I got access to the city, when I was kind of old enough to get on the train and go to Virgin Tower, go to the Village. And that's where I was like, I go to their jazz section. I was like, whoa, like what is going on here? This is, you know, then it's just, you know, hot, you know, like you said, Headhunters was a huge thing. Mingus was a huge thing. Like all the greats. The Ken Burns jazz documentary had just come out, even though that focuses more of the early era. I wish he spent more time in the 50s and 60s in that doc, but you know, that was pretty informative. So really cookie cutter stuff, but that's what started the trend. But there wasn't a lot of, you know, 14-year-old kids that I was growing up with in suburban New York that were like, oh my God, let me borrow your Miles CD.
No, did not have.
They were like, what the hell's wrong with you? Like, don't you want to listen to Nelly? Like, so
yeah, it was completely.
Yeah.
Nobody talked about jazz as a kid.
But once I got into the music store when I was 16, 17, 18, that's where like I had older guys and girls that would be like, okay, you're touching the surface, but like let's get you to level 2. Or like, oh, you don't listen to fusion, here's, you know, Mahavishnu, or here's Weather Report, or you didn't know that Wayne Shorter wound up doing this, go listen to. And then that's where things just snowballed and became obsessive.
I mean, like it's like I grew up in Queens, right? And the neighborhood I grew up in, there are a lot of jazz musicians that live there. No one talked about it. Like Roy Eldridge lived in Hollis. Jackie Byard lived in Hollis. Illinois Jacquette lived over in St. Albans. Milt Hinton. And these are places I could like ride my bike to, you know, like. But no one went to kids and go, you know, that guy lives, you know, that guy over there is Roy Eldridge. No one said anything about it. It wasn't until later that you find out about this. I didn't know Illinois Jacquette lived not far from where I grew up until they did a documentary on him called Texas Tenor. And you see, I was like, oh, wait a minute. But but no one said anything about all these musicians that live there.
Which is crazy because New York was the epicenter for such a long time. Like other places around the world and in the US, but you would think they'd be something of legend. Were those guys playing in clubs when you were growing up there? Like did they jam? Like was there anything?
Jackie Byard was still playing. Roy Eldridge wasn't playing, but Jackie Byard was playing. Jacquette was still playing. So this guy Milt Hinton was still playing. Yeah, those guys are still playing. But only thing they talked about is funny. The one musician they talked about, like that at one time lived in the neighborhood was James Brown. and he was like there for like a hot minute, you know. But people still talk about, oh, James used to live over in St. Albans or something.
I got to address Stunty. I think we're all very aware of the importance of New Orleans in the jazz movement, but we're not talking about this from a historical ethnomusicologist perspective. We're talking about like Blue Note Records being in Manhattan at the time, like and what's going on. And there's some bias because 3 of us are from New York, so that's what we're going to focus on. Like we're not ignoring that. Anyway,
I mean, I'll say, fuck New Orleans, dude. Fuck them.
What's interesting? So we all think that jazz matters, but it almost seems like happenstance that we all found it, right? Like, you know, you're all right. So I'll let you guys give your perspective, but it seems like at least for Dom and I, like we knew about jazz, but then like Dom happened to inherit records.
Yeah,
like, that started his journey. It doesn't seem like. Well, yeah, maybe. But Mike, I mean, I don't want to speak for you, but it sounded like you were working on duty, right? And you had this station. Were you already into jazz before that station?
I wouldn't say into. No, I wouldn't say into. I mean, you know, I was familiar with it, but you know, it wasn't. I wasn't going out like buying jazz records or anything like that. No. And then you know, and I just just happened to listen to that and just wondering like, you know, is this what they're making the big deal about?
Got it.
And you know, and then from there, you know, like I said, just on my own, you know, that's how
Isn't that kind of how like these stories? It's kind of how anybody discovers any kind of music, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like it's not. There's nothing about jazz that makes it unique in the way you discovered it. You just.
Well, so I'm really glad you brought that up because it's kind of where I was hoping this would go at some point. Let's be really clear. It's hard to walk a mile in America and not hear a Led Zeppelin song on the radio. Right? It's hard to not hear the Temptations if you go through FM stations. Or like what I'm saying is it's not like people were blaring jazz when I was growing up out of their apartment windows or at a block party or something like that, or at a picnic. They were you play all the stuff you expect to hear, which is mostly pop rock music, right? So that's why I find it so interesting that like when the music gets a hold of somebody, it doesn't let go, and it matters, and it becomes essential to those people, like the fans. Like it's you know, Dom mentioned like the jam band thing early on in the conversation. It's no shock to me at all being involved like in that scene to a certain extent from a music fan that jazz lives there, because there is a tenacity in those fanatical fan bases where once they get something they love, they're gonna go all out on it, and the freedom of the music and the approach to the music like lives in that jam scene or that festival scene like perfectly. It doesn't matter like what they're playing. It's just the approach to the music and what they're kind of exhibiting. So I'm just struggling with like I think jazz matters. We all think jazz matters. I just find it really interesting that it's a small piece of the market. I find it interesting that it doesn't grab more people, and I'm not sure why that is, because there's a huge hook here. Like, and I don't know. I guess I'm also afraid that it might not carry on as strong as it should. Like Mike, you said, it'll kind of stay where it's at. It might have a dip here, but it's such a small. It's so underrepresented.
I've never been like one of those like jazz is dead proponents and all that. You know, the market is now I'm just speaking in terms of the United States, but it's moved to where it has, and you know it's I don't envision that changing. But you know, I think creatively, it's the musicians are in a great space now. You know, the ability to create the music that they want. I think they're in a great space. You know, You know, it's not stuff that's going to be played on the radio or whatever, or stuff like that. But you know, I think they have more leeway in the music that they produce and getting it out there than they had in the past. And that's what's so exciting, you know, for me. That's you know, like going out. Like I think this week I'm going to two jazz shows, two clubs, actually the same club, two different performers. You know, even like you know stuff like you know big band. One of the groups I'm saying, you know, one of the leaders, she has her own big band, but it's not, you know, your great grandfather's big band. You know, yeah. So, yeah.
I'm interested in this, you know, being from sort of the same area. So there's a thriving club scene outside of the staples in New York. Like there's good jazz being played a lot live. I'm totally out of the loop. So
yeah.
Yeah.
There are lots of places. You know, you know, your usual venues that people know, like the Vanguard and stuff like that. Dizzy's at Lincoln Center, Smalls, but you know the Jazz Gallery in Brooklyn. There are a number of just smaller venues, Bayou. Just there are a lot of small venues where musicians play.
When you're at a Vanguard show on like a Thursday or Saturday night or something, or one of these other places, what's the demographic like? Is it under 40 at all? Is it?
Well, the Vanguard's different because remember the Vanguard's also a tourist place too.
Yeah,
I don't mean that in a bad way. I feel
the same about the Blue Note. So throw those two out.
No, the Blue Note is the Vanguard.
Worse,
you know, people come. You know, you have a lot of people from outside the U.S. at the performances because it's the Vanguard. You know, they want to go this place where you know they've heard all these greats perform there, and they're also very knowledgeable people about the music. But but they're the and Smalls. You know, I guess you could say the Manhattan club scene. You know, part of the reason why those clubs are basically full is the tourist element, and I definitely don't mean that in a bad way. It's not like it's a tourist. These clubs are tourist traps or anything like that. But you get a lot of people showing up because they're in New York and they associate New York with jazz and jazz clubs.
Yeah. I it's a little bit different, but I used to get the last few times I was at Terror Blues, I was very turned off because I feel like that's turned into that as well, or it's been like a tourist thing. But so outside of the big ones, I get what you're saying, but when you go to these other smaller venues, what is the demographic like? Is it older crowd, younger crowd, mixed? Like, what are your impressions there?
The smaller places and outside of like Manhattan and the main clubs, it skews a little younger. Yeah, it skews.
That's good.
Yeah, but yeah, man, like I said, the main those main line clubs, or if you want to call it, it's sort of a different. It's sort of a different thing. It's not like when I was, you can't from I guess say Thursday through Saturday, if you want to see a show at the Vanguard, you have to like book it way in advance. When I first started, you could just walk up to the door and go in, and pay. Now you have to have reservation for these places, or it's just going to be sold out. So
I feel like even, and this isn't too long ago, you feel like when I was late teens and going into college, I could go, same thing, the Vanguard wasn't that popular yet. It wasn't like that where things would sell out. I could still roll up. But yeah, the past, I would say from my experience, the past 10 years, I go to get a show and it's like sold out. I'm like, what? I'm like, this is sold out. Like, this is crazy. You really got to be on top of it.
Yeah. But like the smaller venues, the bars where they play music, and that those are good. You hear top musicians there.
Have either one of you guys been to the Austin clubs? I mentioned 2 in the chat. We have them downtown. I think there's a couple others too. There's the Elephant Room.
Yeah, not me.
What's there? They got there's 3. They're all like kind of in the same general area. I think there's another one called Monks.
Have you been to them, Joel? Like, what's the vibe? Like, is it packed? Is it?
I've only been to Elephant Room, but it wasn't during a show though. So no, I haven't been there, but I've had friends that have gone, and they say they're great.
Nice.
I mean, I don't have more to. I'm just curious if any of y'all had heard about the Austin scene. How do you guys feel? How you guys like Grant Green?
Yeah.
I'm not a jazz guitar guy, except for some of the more extreme players. I'm not really into jazz guitar too much. Yeah.
Talk about it.
I've always associated with elevator jazz, just like from a raw perspective. Yeah. Sorry. I don't like the clean tone that typically gets associated with jazz players like Burrell, Grant Green. None of those guys ever really appealed to me. Sonny Chirac does. I'm sorry. That's for guitar. That is. I just in that instrument only.
That's kind of how I feel about the vocals. Like, I don't really like clean vocalists. And I feel like a lot of what I hear is like, this is too good. It's not, it's almost like too perfect. I'm like, ugh.
I just think anytime like jazz guitar comes in that setting, like, I just feel like it really changes the dynamic of the group to me. It always sounds a little out of place. That's just my own personal feeling.
Yeah, it could be a bit dominant. I try to keep in perspective, like, most of those jazz guitarists are so ahead of their time. Like, if you think about, like, contextually, historically, like what was being played around them, you're like, damn, like,
yeah,
I was a genius, but it doesn't mean it ages well for people, right?
It's just not my personal preference. I totally get the appeal of it. It puts me into a sort of a fugue state.
Now I know why you don't like Fish. I get it.
I'm trying, man. You're selling to me every day. I'm trying. I am trying. Actually, I'm not trying that hard, Chris. I'll try harder, I suppose.
Don't try it all. Don't try it all, please.
You're hitting me with every angle possible. I'll give you credit on that.
What is the worst jazz instrument?
I know what some people would say.
What's that?
What people would say. Go.
Well, a certain man in the chat would say tuba. He hates the tuba. I know that. That's been well documented. I don't hate any instrument. I definitely don't prefer guitar. I've really gotten into like clarinet and soprano sax and violin, like some of the lesser. Well, soprano sax is used plenty, but I know that's the Kenny G thing, Joel.
Mm-hmm. Look at the hair, dude.
He was ahead of his time. He was behind the times and ahead of the times at the same time.
Listen, in all seriousness, like, I know that, like, you can't ever admit to liking Kenny G in public, but in the jazz world, do you credit him at all with getting people to listen to jazz that wouldn't have liked jazz before?
No. No.
Nothing. You don't find anything redeeming about this.
No, I didn't say that. It's just that, it's instrumental pop music, and that's fine. I don't even think he calls himself a jazz musician.
He's part of jazz.
So part of the problem with jazz, I think, in modern times is when you can't categorize it and it has like a flute or a saxophone or it's instrumental, you say, oh, that's jazz. And I think that's also part of the problem. So Kenny G just gets lumped in as jazz.
Yeah, he says smooth jazz and contemporary jazz on Discogs.
I mean,
but you guys are talking about it's not necessarily guitar, but like this year I came across, and actually it was because I was reading this magazine, and they were doing a feature on Jeff Parker, and they focused on like 2 albums that on one of them he played on, but this guy's name is Dave Easley, and he plays the lap steel guitar. And these two, one album is called Ballads, and I can't remember what the other one is called, but it's freaking excellent. I was like, I was like thrilled. They were like that was like one of my finds, just happened, discovering this guy, because it's not something that's definitely not an instrument I hear in jazz, or that outside of maybe like country music that I'm familiar with.
What was his name, Mike?
Yeah,
Dave Easley.
Dave Easley. All right.
What's it like? Did it sound a little countryish, being a large?
I don't want to say it sounded countryish, but the lap steel guitar, it has that sound to it. Yeah.
Who did you say it was? We need someone to put links in the chat.
So so
about
was it a jazz album?
Yeah. Jeff Parker's on one of them. I can't remember the one, because I had I know, and the reason it came to mind, because when I had posted them on Instagram, I tagged the guy that did the artwork on the album cover, and in like last week he responded and said actually thanks for the credit, and that's how that's why I was thinking about that album, and then we were talking about guitar players, and that just brought that back up.
Well, I was just gonna say, but jazz guitar, I do like. Obviously, I like Jeff Parker, though. I feel like he's doing something a little different than the classic players.
Yeah, and then there's this woman. I don't know if she would call herself necessarily a jazz guitar. Her name is Ava Mendoza, and she did an album with William Carter a couple of years ago, and I think she has.
I have something with her on it, actually.
She has a release out on her own with her own group now.
She plays with Bill Orcutt, I think, too.
Mm-hmm. And when like a lot of people talk about, with the jazz guitar thing, I was like, all right, if you're into, that type of vibe, why don't you check her out?
You know what? Elliot Cruz just mentioned something about Robert Randolph. There was something I've been meaning to ask. I know how Dom feels about these groups, so I'm going to exclude him. But
what?
Mike, so one of the things that was very informative for me in the late 90s and 2000s was a little bit of the movement in New York centered around Medeski, Martin and Wood, and Soul Live. Do you remember those bands?
Yeah.
Acid jazz.
Yeah, I guess it's acid jazz, soul jazz. I think Soul Live is a little bit more soul jazz. But there is a band called The Word. They had one album, but it's Robert Randolph. He's a famous pedal steel player.
Yeah, I've got 2 Robert Randolph recordings, because I became familiar with him through Los Lobos.
Yeah,
that's how I got turned on to him.
So you got to check out this record, because it's Randolph. I think it's Medeski.
Mm-hmm.
I think it's just Medeski on the record. It's Luther Dickinson, who's in the North Mississippi All-Stars. Yeah. And I forget who else, but if The Word, that's the name of the band and the album. I don't think it's on vinyl, but you can definitely stream it, but you should check it out.
All right.
The Wolves.
I love Los Lobos.
Yeah. I've seen them a bunch. They're great.
Yeah, I used to see them. I haven't seen them in a number of years, but I used to see them every time they came to New York.
I definitely seen them at Irving and Roseland. I think more Irving later on. I think they played when Irving because it's a little bit smaller, but I've definitely seen them a bunch. They're still around, I think.
Yeah, they are. Yeah. The first time I saw them, because I actually just they were the first group that I saw when I got back from Japan. I saw them at Webster Hall, but Webster Hall, they hadn't gone back to the name Webster Hall at the time. It was called the Ritz.
The Ritz, yeah.
And they put on a really good show. They had who else came out? They had the group Room Full of Blues. Ronnie Earl from Room Full of Blues came out and played, and one of the encores. And they had a bunch of people come out and play. It was really, and they had an opening band from San Diego, rockabilly band called the Paladins, who I still like them.
Nice.
All right, question for the panel here from Decoy Records. When was the last jazz show concert you've gone to? What percentage of shows you go to are jazz musicians groups?
Huh. It's lame here. I haven't been to anything that's jazz related. Maybe there's a few local musicians doing like avant-garde jazz here, but I haven't gone to visit anything.
I'm kind of lame too. I don't really go to shows anymore unless it's Fish. So
yeah, I went last week because they had the Winter Jazz Festival in New York, and actually I met up with two people from the VC, and I'm going to. It's mostly jazz for me. I'd say like 90%. I'm going to definitely one show, maybe two this week. And then February, there's this group that I like called Ahmed. They're doing a show in Brooklyn in February, and I'm meeting up with another person from the DC there to check them out. And we saw this person that I'm meeting up with. We saw that group at Big Ears also. So I met up with a lot of people in the VC at Big Ears also, and all we did was, it was great. It was like show to show, and it's not just a jazz thing, Big Ears, but I would recommend that anyone, if you're really into music, just check it out. You'll have a great time.
Where is Big Ears?
Knoxville, Tennessee.
Yeah.
Is it the same place every year?
Yeah. Yeah.
Oh, cool.
Yeah.
Yeah, my friend is in the band with me. He's from Knoxville. He goes every year. He's been going since the beginning. So he makes his pilgrimage down there every year. I'm trying to get him to get our band in there. It hasn't happened yet, but
it'll happen.
Yeah.
So I have a question for the panel. This is for everybody. Mike, you brought up the VC. I forget sometimes around a vinyl community stream here, but I'm of the opinion that jazz has had a profound impact on vinyl and the vinyl resurgence over the past decade or so. I think you and Dom and Jason and Joel have been collecting longer than me, so you probably have a bit deeper historical context here, but I'm curious everybody's thoughts on what role do you think jazz plays in a lot of what's happening with vinyl resurgence?
I mean, it gets the most sort of play from the reissue market, that's for sure. It's well, maybe not the most, but it's certainly when you look at a batch of whatever's coming out in a given week, a lot of it is jazz reissues. So there's plenty for people to choose from if they're getting into it or getting turned on to things. There's just I think it's easy to show people like, oh, look, you can hear great sounding records for a decent price, I suppose, and it's easy sort of to jump off that. There's a lot of great reissue labels coming out, even though I'm not necessarily buying them myself, but it's pretty rich right now.
Mike, what do you think? Do you think it has any impact or role or?
Yeah, I mean, it definitely has a role. I think I don't know. I think it's a little less than maybe what it was. Well, the pandemic's the pandemic. Everybody was home. But I actually see, I see less people doing, videos about, reissues or Blue Note stuff than a few years ago. But unfortunately, it hasn't translated to people doing, videos about, new artists or whatever. But yeah, I mean, it'll always. I don't know. The jazz reissue thing has been going strong since the freaking 80s. Since CDs started. And it's a formula that works. And, it'll always work because every few years you get just enough. I think you get just enough new people interested in that they can feed that. That new Coltrane issue that that they did 5 years ago and 5 years before that. So yeah so yeah they just I think it just I think it's the reissue thing feeds it, but I think the sort of now that a lot of these, the people that we know in the VC have been around for quite a while, that, you're not seeing that much of those videos that we saw a few years ago.
Yeah, the hype has kind of died down.
Yeah.
Rojas, what about you? I know you have some strong opinions on this.
As long as the Draz reissues are, mastered by Kevin Gray, I'll be avoiding them till the end of time.
Someone did call me up. They told me they wanted me to order a record for them. It was ZZ Top, and I'm not talking shit, customer, if you read this. But they wanted the Rhino one. So they say, I want you to get this specific one. And they start reading the Obi strip that they saw online. And it's the one that Kevin Gray cut a coherent on. So they're reading it off to me. And I was like, Jason would be dying right now.
But I mean, I'm going to say, I have to agree with Mike here. Let me just interject here. With these jazz albums, it is actually a great time for jazz, right? I mean, with new players, of course, but also these reissues coming out. I know I'm very well known here, right, for talking shit about these reissues, but I mean, let's face it, you're either going to pay, hundreds or thousands of dollars for these, the originals, and I hate that it's gone to that point, that sucks, but I'm glad that you can get them, for at least a reasonable price. That's where it is. I mean, if they start releasing audiophile Spyro Gyro records, I'm out. I'm done. I'll sell my collection. So
Yellow Jackets, maybe.
Yeah, that's right. I'm done. So anyone in these labels watching this stream right now, you know how to get me out of the game. Okay.
You just ask for it. It's going to happen.
That's right.
If that, I'm not saying that there's a bubble, but there will be signs. That's great. Well, fellas, go ahead, Joel. Sorry.
I love that Juice Newton and Anne Murray are in the chat.
I know. I'm not sure. Not sure how they're. Yeah.
I don't know how that happened.
What do jazz fans feel about the fact, to me, from my not totally uneducated, but we'll just say uneducated perspective, when I see them do jazz reissues, it's always the same albums, right? It's the same 4 Miles Davis records, the same 2 Coltrane records. They just keep doing reissuing the same things instead of going deeper into the catalog. Is that correct? And if it is, how do you feel about it?
I'm kind of immune to it, I think, because I came in to this, like when I have the poster on my wall back there. Like I remember when Columbia put the Miles stuff on CD in like the late 90s and 2000s, and it was like it was mayhem. Like if you were into that, it was a big deal. Like working at the music store was like, we got to promote this, we got to talk about it. And then like 10 years later, they reissued the stuff again, and then like they start reissuing it on vinyl. So like for me, like I don't care, honestly. Like what I've exerted a lot of self-control, especially over the past like 2.5 years. Like I'm never buying another copy of A Love Supreme or whatever. Pick any record. So like I have mixed feelings on like for it doesn't. I've taken the position like it doesn't apply to me anymore. But I'm happy that it's coming back out for other people to get into. Like I'm in a lot of conversations where we complain like, oh, there's another Kind of Blue reissue. Like it's the best selling jazz album ever. Like people should have access to it. Should they be milking people for it who have already bought it? Like that's on the consumer. But I think it's important this stuff is in print, and I think it's important people have access to it and they have options to buy it, whether it's an inexpensive copy or an expensive copy. Because to Jason's point, like go buy a VG of one of those albums, it's going to cost you an arm and a leg. So yeah. I don't mind.
I mean, and sometimes, they do, these companies, they do go a little deeper into the catalog and bring up stuff. Or like last year, they reissued the Sonny Chris record that you could only find like the 1970 Green Label Prestige. That was the one that you would have the most success in finding, because it was reissued on CD, and that Green Label Prestige was the only other reissue that they did. So they they finally reissued it. And that I think that's great. That's a positive when they do something like that. And you see a little more of that now.
Cool.
I also
we're gonna end. Go ahead.
I think like the Blue Note Classic series is great for people who are getting into jazz or don't have those copies. For $25, you get an album you feel like you should have or want to take a chance on. I think that's a good thing. Like I think there's a lot of, that's why I think it's really kind of important for vinyl that this stuff is coming out. So, but yeah, to Mike's point, when they go a little bit deeper, level 2, level 3, that's a lot more fun for a lot of people based upon what they own.
All right, Sorry, Groove Seeker, this is how we're going to end this stream. I think 2 hours of you guys defending jazz.
Oh, love this question. Love it.
We're going to go we're going to go through the panel here, and this is how we're going to end it. Question for the panel: What is the one jazz album someone who knows nothing about jazz should go out and buy? We'll start with Joel.
Don't show it. Don't even. Don't.
Do it. Show it.
I'm not doing it. I was gonna say something by Herbie Hancock.
Which one?
Fine. Here, the fucking. I don't listen. I do think this is a good album, but if you don't consider it jazz, that's fine. Okay. But no. But I was gonna say something from Herbie Hancock. If I'm being serious, I'm not sure which one though. You can go to the next person. You got your gag, okay? You got it, okay? You got it.
Go ahead, Rojas.
Groove Seeker, go. Nah, we'll just go. Keep going. Chris.
I would say, I mean, this is so hard. I would give somebody like Art Blakey.
Do you need more time? Do you need more?
Yeah, I do need more time. That's why I said
an Art Blakey record, because I was going to ask you about that Art Pepper Meets the Rhythm section that Mike from the In-Groove stated was his favorite album or something like that.
Oh, yeah.
Well, he's got a lot of copies to sell. But.
Yeah. But do you like that album? Do you really think that's a good jazz album?
I mean, it's a safe. I'm going for a safe pick. That's why I need to know the person. I'm going for a safe pick. Anyway. Mike, what would you recommend?
It would be a safe pick, and I'm just going from like personal experience. I think Coltrane, my favorite things. because
Yeah.
that's like, like I used, when I would have like, I would spend like Thanksgiving with like a friend, that's the one thing her mother would play. That would be on like on repeat throughout the whole freaking dinner. Coltrane, my favorite things. That was the only jazz recording she had, but it got played. It's just something people, they're familiar. It's something that's familiar to people because of they've all seen the Sound of Music and stuff like that, and
Yeah. Don, what would you pick?
Yeah, what I said earlier, Dolphy Out to Lunch, I think is a great pick for a lot of reasons. It's interesting. It's a little different, but it's got classic elements to it as well. It's you know when you hear it, it's a very singular sound, singular record.
Yeah, it touches so many.
And it's his last thing he did. It's just insane.
Yeah. Rojas?
Vince Guaraldi, Charlie Brown. Just kidding. Just kidding.
The Charlie Brown jazz album.
That's right. I would, Good Grief. Do you know that one? That's a good one. I would pick Nina Simone, Little Girl Blue, and maybe if you were feeling adventurous, if the person was, wanting to get there, maybe Sonny Chirac, Black Woman, or As the Ages. Go hardcore, right? Those would I pick, like Soft Sweet with Nina Simone, and then maybe some whacked out jazz guitar by Sonny Chirac.
Yeah, I would just have to be. It'd have to be like a 5-pack, I think.
You would do a 5-pack with somebody.
Yeah, something like that. But yeah, I like
video, Chris.
Yeah,
5-pack O Jazz by the Groove Seeker.
5-pack of jazz.
That's right.
5-pack of jazz to prove that it still matters and it should matter to you.
But you have to show Music Matters jazz releases.
I think I have one of those, maybe two. Come on, man.
Jason will let you borrow his collection.
That's right. You will get 3 copies of the Nina Simone Little Girl Blue record. You would get the believe it or not, I have the double 45 version. That's really touted, but heads up, it doesn't sound as good as the original. I mean, just heads up.
I don't think Nina Simone gets enough.
If you come down
talk in this, enough love really.
No, she doesn't.
No,
but
maybe I will
jazz?
do a stream. She jazz? Did you ever see her yell at the audience? I'm pretty sure she's jazz.
I love
she's her own thing.
Yeah,
she's a what do you call her, Dom? A master?
I do. I have a section of like the obvious stuff, and she's in there.
Yeah,
right here.
Like I'm not saying she's not jazz, but I feel like she touches many corners.
Yeah.
I love that Wild as the Wind record, man.
I got a bunch here. Yeah, also show some records. This I found for like a $5 like 10 years ago. Yeah,
hell yeah.
Yeah, that was
selling for a lot more.
That was nice. And I still have a reissue of it too. Look at that. This is a really cool rock crossover where she's doing
that's the Bee Gees covers on there.
The Birds, I think. I got to pull it out here. This is pretty findable, and it's actually quite good. Leonard Cohen. I got a little sticky on there.
She definitely does the Bee Gees on that. I'm almost positive.
Suzanne, Leonard Cohen, Turn, Revolution. I Shall Be Released. Just like Tom Thumb's Blues. The Times Are Changing. Yeah, I really enjoy it. Yeah.
The coolest thing about Nina Simone, well, she kind of grew up in between where I live and where Mike lives. And her neighbor was Malcolm X, which I find to be like I think they live right next door to each other, right? Which is in Mount Vernon, which is crazy. Imagine that. It's wild. Yeah, Nina.
Nina.
That's funny.
This is how we're going to end this stream.
To oblivion.
So I want to. So I want to thank Mike Notes and Tones for coming up here.
Yes,
and,
thanks, Mike.
Yeah, thank you, Mike.
Defending
Thanks for-
jazz.
Oh yeah. Thanks for
I
having
want
me.
to thank Dom.
Thank you.
Dom Seeking a Thread, Chris Grooveseeker, and Kenny G Lover, Joel Static
welcome.
ATX. And thank you everyone in the chat. We're going to see you next time. Peace,
Don't forget
everybody.
Wolfman and 15.
Can you put his link in the chat? Or
I
somebody, Stevie, can you do that?
I thought
All right,
Joel
we'll see you
would
next
have it
time,
ready.
everybody.
Night, guys.
All right, Joel's going to talk now. Bye.
Huh?
How do I end this?
How do you end it?
There we go.
I was going to say something to Mike